The rain fell softly outside the narrow windows of the small tuition center. A single light flickered above the desk where a young girl sat with her books open, her eyes filled with a mixture of curiosity and nervousness. Her name was Aisha. She was only 17, a final-year student preparing for her college exams, and though she was bright, she often struggled with confidence. That was the reason her parents had enrolled her in private tuition classes. They wanted someone who could guide her, someone patient yet strict. Her tuition teacher was a man named Mr. Rahim. He was in his mid-30s, quiet, disciplined, and always dressed neatly in simple clothes. He carried an air of seriousness, and most of his students respected him for his dedication. Yet there was something unusual about him, something no one could exactly name but everyone could feel. He never spoke about his personal life, never smiled much, and whenever the lessons ended, he left quickly without any unnecessary conversation. Aisha noticed this from the very first day. Unlike other teachers who often talked freely, Rahim Sir kept his distance. He taught with precision, answered questions calmly, and moved on. But behind his dark eyes, she often saw a shadow, a kind of heaviness, as though he carried a story untold, a secret locked deep within his heart. As days turned into weeks, Aisha grew more comfortable with the lessons. She began to trust him as a teacher. Slowly, she also began to wonder about his silence. One evening, when the rain poured harder than usual and she was the only student who had shown up for class, she found herself gathering the courage to ask. "Sir," she said softly, closing her notebook, "why do you always look so sad?" Rahim Sir's hand froze on the chalkboard. For a moment, the only sound in the room was the thunder outside. He turned slowly, his face calm but his eyes suddenly clouded. "I am not sad," he replied in a low voice, "I am only busy with life." But Aisha knew it was not true. She tilted her head and looked at him carefully. "No, sir, I can see it. You teach so well, but there's always something behind your eyes. It feels like you're hiding something." Rahim inhaled deeply and adjusted his spectacles. "Some secrets," he said quietly, "are not meant to be shared." That answer only deepened her curiosity. She wanted to ask more, but his tone made it clear the conversation was over. Yet that night, when she went home, she could not stop thinking about it. What secret was her teacher hiding? Why did his voice sound so heavy, as though he carried guilt? Weeks passed. Aisha's exams came closer, and she worked hard. But her attention often drifted toward Rahim Sir's mysterious silence. She began to notice the little things, how his hands trembled slightly whenever he held a pen, how he sometimes stared at the empty chair beside his desk, and how his eyes watered silently when he thought no one was looking. One evening, after a long lesson, she gathered courage again. "Sir," she whispered, "if you ever want to share your secret, I promise I will listen. Maybe it will make you feel lighter." For the first time, Rahim looked at her not as a teacher, but as a human being who had been holding too much pain. He did not answer immediately. Instead, he closed the books, locked the classroom door, and sat across from her. The rain outside seemed to pause as if the world itself waited for his words. "My life," he began slowly, "was once very different. I was not always a tuition teacher. I used to be a lecturer at a big college, respected and admired. I had a family, a wife, and a little daughter. They were my world. My students loved me, and I thought life was perfect." His voice trembled, and Aisha felt her heart tighten. "But one night," he continued, "everything changed. There was a fire in our apartment. It spread so quickly that by the time I woke up, the smoke had already filled the rooms. I tried so hard, to save them. I carried my daughter in my arms, but the fire was too strong. My wife was trapped in the kitchen. I went back for her, but..." His voice broke, and for a moment he could not continue. Tears rolled down his cheeks silently. Aisha's eyes filled with tears too. She had never imagined such pain behind his calm face. "They both died," Rahim whispered. "That night I lost everything. People told me it was not my fault, but how can a man believe that when he is alive, and his family is gone? Since then, I have lived with this burden. I left the college. I could not stand the sight of crowded halls. I chose a small tuition center, away from attention. I teach because teaching is the only thing that keeps me alive, but the darkness never leaves me." For a long time, silence filled the room. Aisha felt her chest heavy with sorrow. She wanted to say something, but words seemed too small in front of such pain. Finally, she whispered, "Sir, you are carrying this alone." That's why it feels so heavy. But maybe if you allow people to care, it won't feel so dark anymore. Rahim looked at her with tired eyes. You are too young to understand pain like this. Maybe, she admitted, but I understand loneliness. And I understand that sometimes, when we hide secrets, they eat us from inside. You taught me formulas and grammar, sir, but today you taught me something else, that even the strongest people carry scars. For the first time in years, Rahim smiled faintly, though it was a broken smile. You are wise for your age, Aisha. Perhaps you are right, perhaps silence is not always strength. From that day, something changed. Rahim did not suddenly become cheerful, nor did his pain vanish. But he no longer hid behind complete silence. Sometimes, between lessons, he would share small memories of his daughter, the way she laughed, the way she used to draw on his books. And whenever his voice trembled, Aisha listened with respect, never judging, only understanding. As exams approached, Aisha worked harder than ever. She wanted to make him proud, not only because he was her teacher but because she felt connected to his story. She realized that her own small fears, failing an exam, disappointing her parents, were nothing compared to what he had endured. And yet, he still taught, still gave knowledge, still helped others. That inspired her deeply. On the day of her final exam, Rahim sir handed her a pen. This belonged to my daughter, he said softly. She once told me she wanted to be a writer. I kept it all these years, afraid to touch it. But today, I want you to use it. Write your answers with it, and remember, no darkness can stop the light inside you. Aisha's hands shook as she accepted the pen. I won't let you down, sir. The exams went well. When results came, Aisha had scored among the top students in her city. She rushed to the tuition center with her result card. Sir, I did it. She cried, her eyes shining. Rahim looked at the paper, and for the first time in many years, tears came to his eyes not from pain, but from pride. You did it, Aisha. And more than the marks, you taught me something I had forgotten, that life can still move forward. That evening, as the sun set behind the clouds, Rahim stood outside the tuition center, watching the students leave with laughter. He turned to Aisha and said, Thank you, for reminding me that teaching is not only about books. It is about touching lives. Aisha smiled. And thank you, sir, for trusting me with your secret. Now it is no longer dark, it is a story of courage. The shadows in his eyes did not disappear completely, but they softened. For the first time in years, Rahim allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, tomorrow could hold hope. And so, the tuition teacher who once carried only darkness found a small light in the heart of a student who chose to listen. It was not a perfect ending, but it was a beginning, a chance to live again.